Hello, everybody who is trickling into the webinar. If you're here for the discussion on navigating tariffs, supply chains, and rising costs, you're in the right place. We're going to give people just a couple of minutes to get into the webinar room. In the meantime, as you're coming in, we would love to know where you're joining us from. I think we have people from all over the place who have registered for this webinar. Personally, I'm joining from Toronto, Canada. Dan, what about yourself?
Well, today I'm in Montgomery County, Pennsylvania, outside of Philadelphia.
Okay. Alex?
So today I am in New Jersey, central New Jersey, but I am based out of New York City.
Love it. And Richard?
I'm in Calgary, Alberta.
Hi. All over. I see in the chat we also got somebody from New Jersey, Foley, Alabama, Southern Indiana. Amazing. Yeah, don't hesitate to type in where you're joining from. As we wait for folks to get into the chat, I do want to go over a couple of housekeeping items. So first of all, everybody usually wants to know, is the session recorded or not? Will we get a recording? Yes, you will. So if you have to jump early for whatever reason, watch out for that recording, and it will be in your inbox within a day or so. And second, because this is a live interactive webinar, we really want people to take advantage of that. So I'd love everybody to use the chat and engage both your panelists, but also other attendees with any questions. As we were receiving the registrations to this webinar, we got a lot of questions from all types of businesses. And some folks are affected by the price fluctuations. Some folks are affected shipping products from different parts of the world. So I would encourage everybody to type in the chat what your business is and what kind of challenge you've been facing, and the unique setup that you have. And I think we will have a very fruitful discussion as a result of that. Okay, so it's 2 minutes after 2. We will get started. First up, this is our agenda for the day. We're going to run through some quick introductions from the panel, and then we'll also introduce Katana and method quickly. Then we will dive into our panel discussion. We'll wrap things up by talking quickly about the method and Katana partnership, and then we'll wrap things up with a live Q&A. And with that said, I want to start off with introductions. So first up, we have Richard, who is the Technology Partner Manager at Katana. He helps expand the platform's ecosystem of connected tools for growing businesses. And he spent 6 years managing software partnerships. Today, he's focusing on building and scaling integrations that power more flexible, efficient operations. And he's going to be our go-to expert for everything inventory. Richard, anything to add? Did I miss anything?
You've got absolutely all of it down. Thank you.
Love it. Next up, we're also joined by Dan, who is the founder of Danwidth, the chief content creator at School of Bookkeeping, and the host of QuickBooks Power Hour. He's a trusted consultant with decades of Intuit product experience, and today Dan helps businesses streamline financial workflows and use the right tech to run efficiently and spend more time doing what they love. Dan, anything to add?
No, just the reason that I said today I'm in Pennsylvania is because I live and work remotely in an RV. So you never know where I'm going to be showing up, but I'll have my stuff packed behind me just in case I need to go.
I love it. And I believe that people can follow you actually, right? To see where you're traveling. What is your website called?
Yeah, it's called whatthehellrvdoing.com. So it's got a map on there of where we've been and where we're going and what we've done.
Yeah, so if you want to keep up with that, I strongly encourage you to go and check it out. It's really fun. Love to have you here, Dan. And then we are also joined by Alex Flores, who is the consulting manager in Presti Naegele, an award-winning accounting and advisory firm. He has over 15 years of experience consulting businesses on their finances and operations. And as a top-rated QuickBooks ProAdvisor, he's an expert in building custom reporting solutions and financial workflows that deliver real results. Alex, so happy to have you here. Anything to add?
No, that's great. Said it pretty good. It makes me look good. So I appreciate it.
Well, it's all true. So we're gonna get started right away. And of course, the webinar is hosted by me. I'm Mattis. I lead content here at Method, and I've spent the past decade working at the intersection of sales, marketing, and finance. And we'll be diving into all things kind of customer management and how all of that relates back to your financial stack. And with that said, I'm going to throw it over to Richard to set the stage for today's discussion. Richard, over to you.
Yes. Yeah, so we're going to start it on something really cheery. We're going to talk about the increase, the increase in production costs that we've seen. So because with Katana we handle manufacturing and production and inventory for SMBs, that also means that we get some interesting access to customer data, and we can see specifically how much prices are going up, what trends are impacting our users. So yeah, first and second slide will be a little bit of quantification around what's happening in the industry, but then we're going to get to how to resolve all this and how to work through the scenarios that we're all going through with the conversation. So production costs, we all know they're up. Things have gone up in really feels like all industries, all markets, especially over the past 5 years, but particularly over the past 12 months. So we looked at about 500 different SMBs who are using Katana in the US right now. They spend about 300 million each collectively on procurement per month. We can see that their average unit price has gone up by 30% in 2025 compared to the year before. So things do feel a bit destabilized, but when you've got the right data at hand and the right tools, you can get a little bit more organized and agile. And we're going to go over to the next slide. Okay. This is a quote from our co-CEO, Ben. So once again, looking at the rising cost of manufacturing and how that's impacting our users, we can see that there was a pretty steep increase to the cost of goods sold in consumer products. This is particularly around cosmetics and pharmaceuticals, but I know it impacts every single industry on the planet. So up 103% compared to Q3 in 2024. So getting your stock levels is really critical so you're not left with an overstock that can really impact your profitability. That means you can have the things that your customers want and need on the shelves so you can either sell it or modify it, repackage it, and you're not left with overstock of things that don't actually sell. But we're going to today talk about how you can prep for pricing adjustments, auditing and optimizing your suppliers, and automating your sales order flow. So when these fluctuations and changes and uncertainties do happen, you're prepared and it won't be quite as bad. Next slide.
Thank you, Richard. Yeah, and we're going to spend a little bit of time just introducing Katana and Method to anybody who's new for a bit of context of why we're talking about this overall.
Yeah.
Richard, over to you.
Perfect. So yeah, Katana, we are a manufacturing and inventory platform. We specialize in small, medium-sized businesses, food and beverage, pharmaceuticals, cosmetics, like I just mentioned, clothing and apparel, machinery, metal, automotive. Those are what we really specialize in. And we help people sort of essentially manufacture smarter so they can produce things efficiently. They can work with their retail teams or their production teams to make the things that they need so they can sell them. But we also really focus on helping people purchase and plan smartly, so they can minimize their the cash that they tie up in inventory and they can increase their sales volume. Now we're going to talk about Method.
Love it. Thank you, Richard. So a little bit about Method for anybody who's new to us. We're a customer relationship management platform that helps specifically growing QuickBooks-based businesses streamline their sales operations and their customer management. So we actually boast the best two-way and instant sync between your CRM and QuickBooks that you'll find on the market. And that's whether you're on QuickBooks Online or QuickBooks Desktop. And that means that you can get this end-to-end workflow automation. So everything that is happening in your kind of sales activities on the front end is directly reflected on the accounting and the back end and vice versa. And it gives you that real kind of visibility into everything that goes on in your business without you having to connect those dots manually. And that happens without all the fuss. So you don't need to have, enterprise level ERP implementations. You don't have to contort your business into a more generic CRM process. Method is really, really customizable and fits your workflows, whatever they are. And that's whether you want to use it out of the box or whether you want to have something custom made for you. We always have a team of dedicated support specialists to help you out and get you working the way that you want to be working. So that's a little bit about Method. But enough about us. And let's jump into the actual panel and Q&A with our first question around tariffs and how the recent tariff changes have impacted sourcing and pricing strategies. So I think I want to throw this first one to Dan and Alex. Dan, maybe you to begin with, just around what you're seeing with the strategies changing with all the volatility that's been happening.
Yeah, it just really depends. I hate to give the adult diaper answer of it depends to how a business will manage these sort of things, but it really just depends on the business that they're in. Like I have one client that I work with that is a wine importer, and you're not going to get French wine from anywhere other than France, right? So they're limited on, well, I can't get French wine from Italy. They're kind of upset about the French wine coming into Italy. So that ends up causing where in this particular person's case, they're kind of stuck when a tariff gets imposed or deposed or changed or modified. We're just really living in a volatile space right now when it comes to tariffs. And this guy actually has a double whammy because the value of the dollar against the euro, he's having a double, he's getting it from both sides, right? Where his dollar doesn't go as far as it used to be because of foreign currency exchange. So he has to get his sources from where they are. Like, he can't change the source. Other companies might be able to be a little bit more nimble and modify where they get their products or services from, but this guy has it in both cases, and his only choice is to talk to his importer or his exporter, right, and see what they can maybe come up with. And I was kind of curious from Alex's perspective, at what point is it just a wait and see, grin and bear it, type of thing? Is this going to blow over? Is that kind of a conversation that we need to have with some of our clients?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a definitely good question, and it does lead into sort of the what are you doing to track this information? What are you doing to kind of keep track of what your pricing models are and where the costs that are associated to it come from. Too often I've seen where it's like, hey, I know kind of roughly what the cost of the products that I'm selling are, or I have them in a spreadsheet, or it's I know that my margin should be X. Well, with clients that are suppliers overseas, and whether they're manufacturing or distribution, the real key is, like, are you tracking your landed costs? Are you really truly nailing down what your margins are on the products you're selling? And probably prior to these recent tariff fluctuations, it wasn't necessarily a priority, where I think and specifically I have a client who's a startup that is supplying or getting supplied from Israel. And the reason they went that route was it was much cheaper than having it manufactured here in the U.S. Okay, and we know our cost is typically X because that's what's in the bills from the supplier, and that's how we're basing our pricing model on. Well, now with the tariffs increasing, I think with Israel it's like 25%. That changes everything, right? And all of a sudden it's like, well, are we actually making a true margin on this product? And if not, what do we do to properly track what the cost is? And in most of those cases, it's tracking landed cost, right? And what do we do to track landed cost, and how do we go about doing that? So it definitely, opens up the conversation of properly having the right systems implemented in order to do that, which is I think why we're here.
Thank you, Alex. And we were, I think, just before the call started, you were updating us with some news, and it does feel like the situation is ever evolving. Do you want to discuss that a little bit with the recent news?
So for those of you who are following, yesterday one of the International Trade Federal Court ruling that passed down that the tariffs increase, or the Liberation Day tariff increases, were unconstitutional and are not currently paused. So that, going back to Dan's point of the ever kind of fluctuating change, it now kind of brings it back full circle, where it's like, well, we had to account for these increased costs. So the net effect of that is, well, either we're eating those costs or our customers are going to eat the costs. Well, now it's reversed. Having the right systems in place helps you sort of analyze and make the right decision on what that news does to the business. So definitely having something in place will just help you kind of navigate this quickly, as opposed to down the line where all of a sudden your profits are getting eaten into, or you have unhappy customers because you're raising prices to them.
I have a question about tariffs. When are they actually levied? Is it when the goods land, or when they are ordered?
So when they land. So typically you have a broker, right, that handles the duty or the customs portion of receiving the goods. And I think at that point, based on whatever the tariff schedule is when the costs get added. And I think prior to all of this talk in the last year, it was always like customs and duty, right? That was the kind of the industry term. Oh, well, are you tracking customs and duty? That's how that's how the landed cost conversation gets into play, way before, the tariffs became big news. But now, yeah, it's basically at that point where the tariffs get assigned.
So everything that's kind of en route to a port somewhere, they don't even know what what the tariff or duty might be. If it takes 8 weeks for it to actually get here, they may be not having a tariff or having 145%, depending on what the current date of it is. That's got to be terrible for for an importer to be doing it. It's so unknown.
Really appreciate that insight. We do actually have a question from Susan. I love this participation. I do encourage everybody to keep their questions coming. I'm curious if either maybe Alex, Dan, or Richard would have any input on this. Do you know how effectively the brokers are through the shipping companies, whether that's FedEx or hiring a dedicated broker? Has anybody had experience with something like this?
Good question.
Alex, take that one.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I think it's case by case. To kind of steal Dan's term, depends, which I love, and I'll steal that going forward.
No charge for that one. That's free.
I think it depends, because there's depending on the products that you're selling, right? There's just different caveats that may affect you in different ways. So depending on the business, I would say it's case by case.
If anybody in the chat has a perspective as well, I would encourage you to offer it. And we will have a Q&A as well towards the end. So if we can get to your question during the live discussion, we'll circle back to it afterwards. And then Richard, any input on this from what you're seeing with clients on the the strategies around sourcing and pricing?
Yeah, I'm seeing people just being really careful about what they're ordering and where they're spending money, which is a good thing. But yeah, I think we're all starting to see the caution come up. And I mean, trying to focus more on local suppliers or countries where they have lesser tariffs. That's obviously happening. And then some of the other ways is, offering, especially e-com, like offering like bundled purchases where you're trying to increase the units per transaction. So that can at least help offset the overhead that you're going to have anyway. Just trying to like optimize the purchases that do happen.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
I've
appreciate
seen a
that.
lot of like advertisements where they've just been kind of like holding off on ordering and trying to get rid of the stock they have in stock in order to have the cash flow for whatever when and if this ever blows over or whatever the situation ends up landing to be, then they can hit that on the other side of it.
Yeah, I feel like we're gonna definitely go through like a Christmas in July sales season that we don't always have. I think those might come up as we enter sort of midsummer, where people try to free up the cash that they have sitting in inventory and turning that into sold product, heading into, the busy season of October, November, December.
Yeah, yeah, and just touching a little bit on the point, Alex, that you were talking about, in terms of cost of goods sold and how all that gets calculated. I know that what we're seeing with Method is there's this much more importance and weight on also understanding your gross margin kind of across the board on everything that you're doing. And it's something that, depending on what kind of a system you have implemented, you either have a really long lag time before you actually see that, or you can actually have a pretty kind of tight turnaround. Like we have customers who have things set up, not necessarily to deal with tariffs, but to deal with import and export duties that get very, very complicated related to tobacco products within the United States. And because of that kind of custom requirement of dealing with the situation, they've actually created workflows that show them their margins at the end, whatever their setup may be. And I think from a workflow perspective, that's where kind of businesses should start thinking about heading with the tariffs. Which brings us to our next question around this proactive planning. So I'm wondering what people's experiences have been with seeing the response, and how is proactive planning helping some of these businesses stay ahead of supply chain disruptions? And Alex, maybe I'll start with you on this one. With your clients, have you seen a difference in how different clients have responded to
Yeah.
the fluctuations in the market?
Yeah, so interestingly enough, a client of mine who isn't in the manufacturing or distribution space, they're a firework company. They put on firework shows all throughout the country, but they purchase their fireworks from China. So, part of what they generally would do when they price out an event is, okay, well, here's our costs, right? Costs including the fireworks and sort of what the labor is behind it. And now it's well, this is what we have in stock, right, versus what we need to now import in, and with the added cost with the tariffs, changes their pricing model, right? So before they were kind of tracking everything on an average cost method. All right, prices fluctuate, but not incredibly. Well, now all of a sudden you get hit with 100% increase in tariffs. Maybe the conversation becomes should we start implementing a FIFO, first in first out inventory method, costing method, so that we can properly track what our margins are on these different jobs. And again, prior to kind of going to my prior point about emphasizing having the right system in place so that you can see your margins. Too often with these small businesses, and and I think I'm even guilty of it in our business, where it's like, yeah, you kind of know what things will cost off the top of your head. But without having true real data in front of you, it does put you at a disadvantage. So, with this firework company's part of their discussion is, okay, well, we're moving to FIFO. We have our busy season coming up in the summer, but what's our forecast and how do we plan for sort of, after? And discussions with the customers, price changes, things of that nature that, really in order to have that conversation be transparent, they need to be able to have the numbers in front of them to advise them. So yeah, definitely evolving. So yeah.
When I worked at Intuit, I worked with a data analyst who he was one of those things that just stuck with me over the years was, in God we trust, all others bring actionable data. If you don't have the data to make those decisions and make those plans, that's what's really caveat. A lot of business owners, they work off of their gut. And if COVID has taught us nothing, we need to be nimble and be able to make changes. But if you make them off of your gut in unprecedented times, whatever they might be, you may find you're on the short end of that stick.
Definitely. I'm sorry, go ahead, Richard.
Oh, yeah, sorry, go ahead. I was just gonna say, back to this question around making things with your gut versus actually rethinking how you approach a process. There's obviously the proactive management of what do we have the solution, do we have the technology in place to actually deal with this? But then we also have the question around, okay, but what is our methodology? Because whatever solution you implement, it has to be aligned with this methodology. And Alex, you brought up this difference between kind of average cost method and then first in, first out. I'm sure we have a lot of people who are kind of deep in the accounting world on the webinar, but we also may have some folks who are maybe less familiar. At a high level, I'm just wondering if you could comment on why the client is thinking about making this type of difference and what kind of the advantages would be for them.
So for them specifically, it's to, first in, first out is here's the cost, for whatever we have in inventory, and essentially as that gets sold, your costs are aligned with that. And then as you purchase and increase your inventory, whatever the cost is at that time is sort of the cost for your inventory at that point. So in their case, it's, well, if we're doing our pricing based on a certain margin, we need to be able to see our margin prior to these increases and our margin now with the new increases. Going back to the whole, pricing model and how do we, tell our customers that, hey, because our costs have gone up, your costs are going up. So that's kind of where and why, they're planning on doing that.
Gotcha. And that is, I suppose, easier to approach with the first in, first out method to make those communications.
Yeah.
Curious if anybody in the chat has a perspective on that, or what the method is that they've had in their business, and if they've thought about change to address the fluctuations. Richard, what have you seen with folks across kind of Katana's client base in terms of the response to proactive planning?
Yeah, I think they're making sure that they've got multiple suppliers, if possible, whenever possible. And as I mentioned, looking at different countries of origin, and then just using the forecasting tools in Katana, or if they're doing some other sort of forecasting, like focus group planning on like what do they actually care about, what are they going to prioritize, and just making a really informed decision on what they're ordering ahead for. And as Dan mentioned, like not going with the gut, you're kind of just having to look at the data and say, this is what the data says, this is what I'm going to do. And you kind of just got to be at peace with that. You made the best decision that you could at the time, and things will change. But generally, at least if you're going with like something a bit statistical, you're going to have a better chance of getting it right.
Appreciate that insight. I know that at least on methods end, there's one example that comes to mind in terms of having the data and having it tied back to kind of the fluctuation in the world and in the market more broadly. Like we have a client that services polls and actually has a lot of impact sort of trickle down, let's say, from weather events in the region to their business. And they actually have to track kind of what is happening with the weather in order to figure out how to properly resource and anticipate changes. So they've kind of built this entire system within the platform. And it's something, again, that I think figuring out where can I find the right data and where can I find real-time data and let that inform my business and my business decisions is something that folks in the audience would probably want to start thinking about. So moving on to the next question of our discussion, and so really around profitability, how our business is maintaining profitability and what strategies are delivering the strongest results. Alex, I'm going to go to you for this one again to start off with. What are you seeing in terms of margins? Like how are folks protecting them? Who's successful? Who's made mistakes? Without calling them out, obviously, but like what are some mistakes that you've seen maybe?
Yeah, I think, you know, the concept of landed cost is really where, especially now with you know, the tariffs and kind of, you know, that whole fluctuation, the businesses that are able to do that, and it's not just the system, right? It's the capability from a workflow standpoint. You know, inventory as a whole and tracking inventory is a whole challenge, right? And I think having the right system in place helps, but having the right workflow in place is equally as important. So, you know, landed cost is definitely where I think spending the time to, you know, properly implement that, properly using the system that allows you to implement that, gives you the best chance at, you know, making sure that the margins are what they should be or what you're anticipating them being. You know, going back to my earlier example about the startup in Israel, the margins that they initially were pricing everything out at didn't necessarily include, you know, the customs and duties and their landed freight, the landed cost. They kind of assumed, okay, well, here's X. It's a line item on our cost of goods sold, right? Here's our overall margin. But once you start pricing it down by product, it changes. And the businesses that have a handle on that are just, you know, going to be better equipped to handle this and kind of the roller coaster that we're on in terms of costs. And, you know, like I said, I think having the right system in place is critical. Having an inventory management system that can handle this, but also just having the proper workflow. And, you know, with those two, I think those companies are in a better position.
And if we're thinking about landed costs, because we've mentioned a couple of times, like what are some of the things that businesses should start thinking about? Like, okay, I actually want to get really, really good at understanding my landed cost. What are the things that I should start paying attention to? Like, what's kind of step one if I've never really truly considered this as something that I want in my business workflow? And I could go to Alex or either Dan.
Well, I think you know, it really just, and again, it depends. It depends on the business owner's understanding of purchasing products for which to resell, right? A lot of them may have no inventory management experience and just see that, okay, I've paid several $1,000s for products today. That's my cost of goods sold. Well, not exactly, right? Because that's the cost of goods when it's sold. And then now that they get that of the perpetual inventory of things coming out, there's a cost to it that I'm going to recognize, and that's going to be my gross profit. What else does it take to make those goods sold, right? So that's where you want to start to identify things like tariffs, shipping fees, sales tax, other things that it takes to actually get the products available to sell, so that you can then say at that particular moment when that item is sold, what is the real cost of that item, so that I can do everything else based off of the gross profit.
Dan, would using moving average cost instead of FIFO help for that sort of scenario you just mentioned?
It could, but FIFO and LIFO have their own advantages and disadvantages.
Right. Once again, it depends.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We should get a sponsorship opportunity from those folks.
Depends. Yeah.
And I guess for folks to figure out what method really is the best for them, they should probably discuss it with a financial advisor who can understand what the end state kind of reporting needs to look like, what the day-to-day data needs to look like, and really kind of drill into that system. If there's no one right answer, because you don't want to implement something that you're going to have to rip out 6 months later.
Right. And absolutely, you're not going to want to just change your costing method willy-nilly, because the government will want to know about that. And so you can't like change midstreams, like, well, today it's LIFO, tomorrow it's weighted average. No, it's a little bit more complicated of an answer than that.
When is the right time for a business to change their accounting method? Is it like the first day of the new fiscal year for them? Is it a different day?
And I think, again, the depends answer.
Once again, depends. Okay.
Yeah, because it is a bigger discussion, right? So there's the tax implication, but really it depends on how your pricing structure is going to work. If you're steady, if your volume's steady and consistent, right, and you kind of have a forecast where it's the same month over month, average cost works. I mean, that's the more popular, I think, in our space method that most of our clients use. But depending on the industry, the value, the value of the, not just tariffs, but the cost, right? If you're in the metal industry or dealing with, anything that's related to oil and things of that nature, where that volume, kind of, that price fluctuates, then you would have one discussion, right? And I think that's where it does your business justice by having that conversation early on, right? When you're first starting off and speaking to the right advisors to guide you in the right direction. And then once you have that, sort of, okay, based on that advice, here's the route we're going to go. What systems do we use to implement that? And I think, the earlier the better is always the right answer.
I appreciate that insight, Alex. And with that, we are going to move to our next question, because we have discussed a ton of different kind of things that we want to tackle. But I think the biggest one is how do you figure out what do I do first if everything feels very disconnected? So how do you guide clients in prioritizing what matters most when everything feels so urgent? And for a change, Dan, maybe I'll start with you on this one. What's been your experience in figuring out priorities?
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, in God we trust, all others bring actionable data. So it's got to be reliable too, right? So I mean, if your cycle is okay, we're going to reconcile our books, and then 10 days later we'll take a look at them. It may be too late, right? And shout out to Katana, because I really love what they do in allowing you to plan for real life, real time circumstances, right? So you're able to prioritize manufacturing orders or sales orders based off of what you can do today, based on what you have on hand today. So those types of things are having those, back to Alex's point, having those systems in place so that you can actually do that rather than running on gut or spreadsheets that need someone to update them when you have something in place that can actually be just drag and drop, stupid simple, being able to see red light, green light, yellow light on the right on the screen.
It's a great insight. I do think you want to have, yeah, as you say, really robust data inputs. Alex, what's been your experience guiding people through this process of change, and how do you start with the right priorities?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the data and the systems are key. But really we look at the end goal. All right, well, what's our end goal? To provide a good service, to sell a good product, and make money off of it. So it's how do we work our way backwards from that? Do we have a product we can make money? Do we have a service we can make money on that's good, will make customers and clients happy? So how do we work our way backwards? Well, okay, here's a cost associated to that. How do we track that cost? And that sort of builds out from there. And it's data, but it's also making sure that we can manage the data and the client can manage that data. And very often we've seen even Excel sheets, right? People track things in Excel, and it's a good starting point. But really having the end goal of, all right, X, how do we get there? And then what's the right way to do it, is the approach we take.
Appreciate that, Alex. So I want to be conscious of time, so I will keep moving, and we are going to head into our Q&A session very shortly. So if you have questions, if you haven't submitted them yet, please use the Q&A box. If you posted something in the chat, we will address those as well. But for our next question, it's really about the disconnects between the teams, how they hurt visibility, and how do tools like Katana and Method help here. Richard, I'm going to start with you on this one, maybe.
Okay.
From the visibility side, what are some of the transformations that you've seen when people implement a proper platform?
I mean, we've seen people go from they have nothing written down and they've maybe grown from being a solopreneur to having a small team to a medium-sized team. They've maybe gone from having, everything's in their head, they know where everything is in their small workshop to, okay, I've got a team, I've got to maybe write things down on pen and paper for them. Then they graduate to an Excel sheet, which is great to see. But then there's definitely the sort of the tipping point where you go from I can handle it in Excel to I've now got, a tech stack where I've maybe now moved on to QuickBooks for my accounting processes or payroll. I've got a CRM like Method to manage my sales orders. You really need to like bring it all together. So your team's got sort of the singular source of truth, which you might have heard before. That way you're not getting, one data set from Excel, one data set from your CRM, one data set from your inventory platform. You've got everything connected so you can sort of go from the analog pen and paper to the very sophisticated, everything's connected, and you're not sort of duplicating or getting like misinformed on your numbers. So yeah, we've definitely seen people go from they're sort of operating a bit chaotically. Everything is, a bit of a mystery. They're not quite sure what their profitability rates are. They're thinking, the only way we're going to grow as a team is if we add more people. But the reality is they don't need, a ton more people. That actually might make the situation worse, if you're just a little bit disorganized. And you can get sort of, a small handful of tools that are high impact for you. And you can really just digitize your business and you can then start to scale and ramp more efficiently without just adding a ton more people or a lot more complexity to your business.
Yeah, and that kind of leads into like the systems, if they aren't communicating with each other, I've always seen the salespeople sell things that aren't in stock.
Yeah.
Right, because they
Yeah.
can't see that, they don't have that visibility into the real time of what is available to sell, and then they make promises that they can't keep because whatever they were going off of said that they had it in stock, and that might have been, something that was updated weeks ago.
Yeah, and to Richard's earlier point of the single source of truth, we use something similar, kind of the one source of entry with data, right?
Yeah.
And the redundancies and sort of the duplicate work that are so, I mean, we see it all the time, and the reason we implement systems like Method and Katana, et cetera, are to integrate and streamline, right? And I think implementing something where a customer or product gets entered in once and it flows into the different buckets of data in the different systems is critical. To Dan's point about salespeople having access to real-time, statuses of inventory, to being able to enter something in once and not having to have someone else rekey in that data that may be incorrect. It can even be something as simple as a customer name, right? So often I've seen where you have, ABC company, but then ABC ABC company, comma, and now you have 3 or 4 of the same customers in a system that, can potentially cause other issues. So definitely, having integrations in place with systems that allow it is critical to having a good system.
Alex, that's a really good example. It immediately made me think of this franchise business that we serve, where they had this challenge of the head office trying to understand what is happening across the business, but every other individual franchisor was entering things in their own way into QuickBooks. So it's like you might be calling something a green pen, you might be calling something a long pen, but actually the HQ wants to see that as a green long pen or whatever that is. And that standardization has allowed them now to have total clarity into, okay, here's our data. Now we can get into deeper analytics and actually kind of respond to fluctuations and plan more strategically in the long run. So I do want to keep moving here and quickly touch on the partnership between Katana and Method. We are working very, very closely together. And these are 2 tools that people rely on quite a bit. And they're kind of key pillars, I would say, behind these tools. To speak to the first few, it's really about proactive customer management. So when it comes to Method, we really specialize in allowing you to track every customer interaction and then manage follow-ups and maintain these detailed profiles that populate across the board, and connecting everything back to your inventory allows you to have this end-to-end view of what is happening in the entire business. And in addition to the customer communication and management, we also help with optimizing what you're doing with pricing. Once you have this full view and understand, okay, here's what is happening with my orders, here are my margins, here's what my salespeople are communicating. Once you have all of that data in place, you can now get much more strategic with what you're doing with pricing and how you're responding to changes in the market in real time. And then Richard, on the other 2 points, I'll throw it over to you.
Yeah, so thing we already sort of touched on before, but pre-stocking the tariff impacted materials and or diversifying suppliers can be a bit tricky. But when you've got 2 platforms connected, you can sort of use Method to store your customer data. You can understand your buyer trends. You get some sales forecasting. Katana could then use this data to plan long-term inventory for your raw material purchases. You can also look at the locations, so you can see, will I be more impacted by this, like supplier A or supplier B? You can also look at your supplier reliability and decide if you want to proactively onboard alternative vendors. With Katana, you can understand your performance, like delivery times and pricing trends. Does it go up? Does it go down? And then you can use Method to manage your supplier interactions, which can help you negotiate better, and then will improve your customer relationships in the end. So it's very much like a cohesive circle, like one feeds into the other.
Exactly. And with that said, Richard, we have 10 minutes or so left. I do want to dive into questions and address the things that people want to know about a little bit more. And Susan over here was asking a little bit earlier about the tariff updates and what is happening across the board with tariffs. What is the best way to understand what these fluctuations are? Is there like a good resource that she could go to? Alex, Dan, anything comes to mind? I know that there are standard kind of import publications that allow you to check what the current tariffs are, but where would you go to, Alex or Dan?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely there's a U.S. There's a government website that tracks the schedules. I know, if you wanted to be granular and look up your specific product and where it's being shipped from, but I mean, honestly, I think just following the news is really, what I do. Have a tickler of different news sources and just stay up to date. It's the true actual tariff percentages. There's a website for that. I mean, I can look it up for you and put it in the chat.
Yeah, I'm just doing a quick digging here because I think I'm thinking about the same one. Just want to drop in the chat for people.
Yeah, it's hard to keep up with all this stuff. Like, if you're not watching or having your finger on the pulse for a couple days, and then you come up to the surface and you're like, what? There's something new, or they're on again, off again.
Yeah.
Just that it's hard to keep up with
Interesting
that. And
times. That's the
yeah.
It's a term we use where the market fluctuates based on a tweet, and that's what's happening right now. It's one or X post, changes everything. So it's interesting, tough to keep on top of.
It feels like we just almost left a market that was fluctuating since COVID, and then immediately into the next one. So, okay, while we're digging for the website, because I did have it written down somewhere, just need to review some of these documents. I want to keep moving with the questions and the discussion, and we have a question here from Sully. And this one will go to you, Richard, about how robust is Katana's demand forecasting capabilities? Are there tools that people are using to layer on top of Katana for that task? Could you speak to that a little bit?
So yeah, we do a pretty good job of planning and forecasting. It is on the consistent roadmap of making it stronger and better. We do have customers that have really sophisticated demand planning needs. So we integrate with a tool called Stock Trim that people will integrate into Katana. It's excellent. It's really affordable, really nice to use. People love it. They will use Katana for inventory manufacturing, but then just rely on Stock Trim to aggregate and help them plan their purchase orders for the future.
I did a webinar series with Katana, kind of comparing, QuickBooks Enterprise, a desktop software, and its advanced inventory functions with, a cloud-based inventory solution. And what ultimately came out of that is that, QuickBooks is really good at a rear view mirror. All Intuit products are really good at looking back at where you've been. This is what we paid in taxes. This is how our sales tax worked. All the things behind you as you're continuing to drive forward. But the analogy here is that there's a bigger picture in the windshield, and you're unable to go forward if you're always looking behind you. And having some kind of tool that allows you to see where you're going, especially with inventory planning, is paramount. Because if you don't have things in stock, you don't have sales, and you don't have ways to pay your people, right? So those things are like super critical watch out for the pothole ahead of you instead of concerning yourself with avoiding the pothole that you did last year.
Right. That's great.
Amazing. Thank you, Dan. And we do have questions still inside of the Q&A, and then we had a whole bunch of questions that were submitted to us through the entry form as people were registering. So we're going to tackle a couple of these. Joe was asking if we obtained copies of the slides, and when we are sending a webinar recording, I'm not sure if we're sending the slides themselves, but we can certainly ask the team. And then Monica wanted to know, how do BOMs work between Katana, method, sales orders, and QBO? Richard, on the Katana side, how would those work? Do you know?
Yeah, so you would have your build of materials, which is BOM in Katana, where you've got the instructions on, part A, part B, part C. This is how they're updated and they're transformed into the finished good. So you would have your sales order go into method, then that would be automated into a production order. In Katana, you could assign that to your team or disassemble, pick, pack, ship yourself. And then when you take the value of your inventory that went into your, finalized good, that would be deducted from your inventory value in QuickBooks, but then it'd be recognized as a sales order, so income in QuickBooks. That's my high level understanding of it. Dan, did I get that right?
You could certainly find yourselves into the weeds with all of that, but the thing is that you're just needing to make sure that your workflows are going to be handled in those various places, and then QuickBooks is just the catcher. I'm full of analogies here, so we're playing baseball. So QuickBooks Online is going to be the catcher of all of this financial impact, not necessarily be concerned with the in and out of inventory movement, even though you can track inventory inside of QuickBooks Online, but the details of what actually does happen is going to happen in Katana, and then the result of that, as far as the financial picture, is going to show up inside of your QuickBooks.
Thank you, Dan. I saw a couple of questions about specifics related to syncing different parts of method workflows back to Katana. I would say if you have specific workflows that you want to have implemented, or you just want to understand exactly how it works, there is a separate discussion that you would need to have. So I would say reach out to us. We would love to hear from you, and we'd love to understand what is the use case and what you're kind of trying to accomplish, and dig into that a little bit more deeply. It's hard without knowing the full context to answer that right on the call. And then there is a question that came in from the registration form that I thought was really, really kind of captured a lot of the challenges that people are dealing with, and it was around. So just give me 1 second. Juggling about 5 different screens right now, so hard to orient oneself. Right, but it was about time management with everything that is happening. How do you figure out? Look, I only have so much time that I can focus on things. How do I, again, back to prioritization? How do I make effective use of my time so I'm getting the most out of it? And maybe we can close off with this one. Alex, Dan?
I mean, I think the key is the workflow, right? And whether or not that workflow can be streamlined so that we're not duplicating efforts. So, I think the theme of my whole points were having the right systems in place, having a system like Katana in place, method, etc., so that you let the tools do the work for you. And I think that's really the best way. The right system, the right process will free up time for you to do what you're good at, business owner, selling, things of that nature.
Thank you, Dan.
And working on what's important, you know, and prioritizing what is important. And if it's something like, okay, I need to know the stuff that a new application, is the juice going to be worth the squeeze? So, you know, is it going to be an educational action of figuring out, you know, implementing something new, or is it best just to weather the storm and do the things that you know how to do, as inefficient as they might be?
Thank you, Dan. And we are at time with that. I know some questions were left unanswered. We will follow up with you and get you the information that you need. I want to thank everybody for joining the webinar. As attendees, I want to thank our panelists. Dan, Alex, starting with you. Where can people find you if they want to connect with you? What should they know about you? We have some QR codes here if you want to visit the websites.
Yeah, if you can reach out, go to www.pnatc.com. You can reach out to me directly, Flores@pnatc.com. And yeah, I'd be happy to have a conversation with you.
Thank you, Dan.
Yeah, and you can find me at School of Bookkeeping. I'm usually lurking there in the background behind the chat bot there. We have a quick answers, so if you have a quick question and you need a quick answer, you can chat with me there for, you know, anything that's in my scope of expertise.
And Richard, if people want to learn more about Katana and connecting with you, where do they go?
Yeah, so if you want more info about Katana, how we can help your business, how we can work with a CRM like Method, or if you are looking to connect your like accounting platform like QuickBooks into your inventory manufacturing, just scan that QR code and you'll be connected with my sales team and someone will walk you through the platform.
Thanks, Richard. And likewise, the same with Method. If you want to learn more about the platform, scan a QR code or just visit method.me and book some time with our sales folks. Thank you again, everybody, for joining. Thank you again for all of our panelists. I hope folks have a lovely rest of the Thursday and hopefully more good news out of what's happening with the tariffs.
Mattis, thank you for hosting and facilitating the chat. It was great.
Of course.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.